So this week we're doing Draw My Life. I was born in Oregon, up in Portland. So was my sister and one of my brothers. My other two brothers were born down in Salem. So there's my mom and my dad, and they were married for 4 years before they had me. And then they had my brother Samuel, who unfortunately was a stillborn, and my little sister. 9 years later, they had my two younger brothers. So that gives you my two youngest brothers, me, and my sister as siblings. Right before my mom had my brothers, my dad found religion in a really creepy way. It wasn't a happy, joy religion. This was very strict and very controlling and very unhappy, and we spent a lot of our childhood not that thrilled with life. Unfortunately, we can't really remember a lot of what happened in our childhood because, yeah. So, we do remember my siblings and I spending a lot of time with my mom's parents, our grandparents, and we loved them very much, and they loved us very much, and took a lot of the strain off of our lives. So, come about the age of 18, I finally decided that I was fed up with all of it, and I decided to make a run for it. And I essentially, even though I was 18, ran away from home. And I didn't speak to my family for a year after that. I got involved with some spooks, and not some nice spooks like these ghosts here, but some retired CIA, FBI, whatever, I don't know. My life got kind of crazy for about 3 years. About the time I turned 21, I met the man who would become the Badger. At this time, he wasn't quite the Badger yet. He was just a really tall, skinny guy with a really fuzzy mohawk, and I was a tiny mohawk chick with a little rat tail because I don't even know what I was doing with my hair then. It was better than really long hair. So he got me my first cooking job, and that's a skillet. I'm really bad at drawing on demand quickly. But I cooked for a long time, and I went to massage school and almost got my license, but then I didn't, and I spent most of my time kind of alone and mostly sad and not spending a lot of time with anybody except myself, but I had an awesome mohawk. I got into riding a bike while I was living in Seattle, which is where I'd moved after I ran away from home. And I went out dancing about 3 or 4 times a night. That was one of my favorite things to do. The other thing was reading large stacks of books and hanging out with my two cats, one of whom was large and fluffy, and the other one was small and crazy. And about the time I was 25, I had gone out one night after a breakup, and I was going to my favorite bar where I like to go dancing and hanging out with the security guy up front, because I always end up being friends with security wherever I go and hang out. And the Badger, who had turned into a Badger by this point, had been at the same bar, and we hooked up, and 4 months later, the Badger and I decided that we were going to get married, as you do, and we got married in a very nice ceremony with a very nice gay Supreme Court judge who married us in his living room. It was really awesome, unlike this drawing here. And we were very happy, and everything was going well. Unfortunately, we ended up having to move to Georgia because the Badger belongs to the military, which means that I get him when the military is not busy with him. So he'll go off and do his Badger military stuff, and I sit at home and I do my Wrangler stuff and wait for him to get home. He does a lot of stuff and goes a lot of places and has a fairly interesting life. He's had a very interesting life, I should say. But that brings us to me moving down to Georgia. And Georgia was where we had our first deployment as a married couple. And I was very sad to see him go. And it was very difficult. I wasn't used to the idea of him going off to war and it actually being that big of a deal if something happened, because that's what you always have to worry about. So I was very sad and depressed, and very happy when he came home. And unfortunately, when he came home, he was not very happy because it had not been a very good deployment. And we ended up in this really horrible cycle of fighting and yelling at each other and being upset, and it wasn't very happy. And we almost ended up leaving each other over the entire thing. We ended up moving to Tennessee, and we were still together, but it was kind of broken and not really working well. And in Tennessee, the Badger was a lot happier because he was better, he was in a better unit, and he was happy at work and all of that, and I was still pretty upset, and we were still fighting, and my health was going downhill, and I was pretty broken, and I started having more and more health problems and more issues. But we got some kitties, and I forgot to draw the buns on this, and the other cat, the evil cat. And I started doing cooking and whatnot. I don't even know what that thing was that I drew. But at one point, the Badger decided that he needed to ask for some help. And so he asked for some help because he'd been having a really difficult time. And while he was getting help, I started working and interacting more and more with a group of women called Her War, Her Voice. And that was helping me to become a better person, giving me a space to be safe and take care of myself and be more healthy. So the Badger got out of working on his stuff, and I continued working with Her War, Her Voice, and he ended up deploying again, and it was very sad. But he came back. I'd been working on my business. He'd been working on his stuff. We were much more comfortable with the idea of each other. It's not perfect yet, but we're a lot happier. What we have now, well, what I have now, I've got my YouTube channel that I found, that I started with my Twitter friends, and my work on the stuff that I do online has allowed me to start working with Her War, Her Voice in an actual position. And we're working very hard to be better us. And that's all I've got. That's my life.